Hello everyone, and welcome to Mr. Simplifies Tutorials. In this video we're going to look at the Porter's 5 forces model, a very popular model which is used for analyzing the competitiveness in a marketplace. A bit of background about this model. So Michael Porter came up with the Porter's 5 forces model while researching the nature of competition in an industry. As you know, industries can differ from one another with respect to various factors. Some factors include profitability, the process through which a product goes from concept to actual sales, and various other factors. Now, how different is each industry to one another in terms of the competitiveness that exists in each industry? That is what this model actually focuses on. Porter actually outlined 5 factors. He was able to pinpoint 5 factors which can be used to analyze the profitability and the attractiveness of an industry. And what can be the potential uses of this model? Well, if you're trying to start a new business in a particular industry, for instance, you might want to run the Porter's 5 forces model on the particular industry of your interest before you actually cement a plan, put a plan in place to actually enter the industry. You'd understand what level of competition exists in the industry, and it would actually help you to actually to finalize that decision to actually get into the industry or not. Let's look at the model. Now, right at the center of the model lies competitive rivalry. And there are 4 other factors, which are the power of suppliers, power of customers, threat of substitutes, or threat of new entrants. We're going to look at each aspect, each force in detail in the course of this video. So, the central aspect, the main aspect that actually defines the level of competition in an industry, or the level of profitability in an industry, is competitive rivalry. This looks at the number of competitors and their strengths in comparison to you. So, if competitors in the industry generate a lot of profit or are really strong in comparison to you, there is a potential for them to generate a lot of profit if they're not already doing so. In terms of an industry, if the rivalry in an industry is intense, then companies often have to lower their prices and provide various other types of incentives to attract customers and continue trading and continue generating enough interest in their products. If the rivalry is not intense in an industry, then the profits are generally high throughout. So what actually influences competitive rivalry, which influences profitability? The bargaining power of suppliers. So, if suppliers have high bargaining powers in an industry, they can influence pricing, obviously, and thereby influencing profits. And when do suppliers in the industry have a lot of power? When there are a few of them, when then they become very powerful automatically. When the customers are actually small or irrelevant in terms of their power in relation to suppliers. If there are fewer substitutes available to suppliers, and if the cost to switching these suppliers is high. Now, throughout the course of this video, we're going to look at one single example primarily. We might look at others, but the primary example is going to be from the automotive industry. And if we look at the automotive industry, some suppliers could be companies like Bosch or Continental or Michelin. Now, if Continental decides to higher their prices, to raise their prices, beg your pardon, then obviously the price of the whole manufacturing process increases. So if you're thinking about setting up a manufacturing unit, that's one of the factors to be considered. Now, the second factor is the bargaining power of customers, or the power of customers. Customers can actually pressurize and drive prices down if they're powerful. And when are customers in an industry powerful? When there are few of them. Obviously, when there are few groups of customers, or when the industry has few customers in general, then they have the capability to exert a certain amount of power on their suppliers. And they have plenty of suppliers to choose from, and the switching costs are low. Then obviously the power of the customers goes up automatically. And again, obviously selected customers purchase significant quantities of products or services. Now, if there are few customers, then this is bound to happen. So it does actually tie in with the first point. Now, examples from the automotive sector can be actual car manufacturers as opposed to suppliers of parts. Dealerships. Well, individual dealerships can also have an influence. Rental and leasing companies. Now, because of the growth of the rental and leasing markets, these are also significant factors for an automotive company to actually think of before jumping into the industry. The next factor is the threat of substitutes. Now, what are substitutes? Substitutes are alternatives that serve the same need. That could be that are mainly from a different industry. So the higher the number of substitutes, the price point normally gets lower, because substitutes can drive your prices down and ultimately influence profits. And if the number of substitutes in an industry are low, then it can result into a monopoly for that particular industry. For example, you can bypass driving altogether, driving between cities, for instance, by choosing a budget airline over actually, taking other modes of transportation or driving yourself. So that obviously, collectively, cumulatively, it can actually drive the demand for automotives down in a way. So now this second example is the second example of the first example is quite interesting because and I've deliberately included this because it's not direct, it's quite indirect for it, and it just refers to choosing taxi services to personal vehicles. So with the increase of usage of companies like Uber and various other similar companies in various parts of the world, what has happened is a lot of people think that taking a taxi to work in a lot of different countries, it doesn't apply everywhere. For instance, if you talk about the United States, there's clear evidence that taking a taxi can sometimes turn out to be cheaper than actually driving to work on a regular basis. So obviously that in the longer run will have some sort of an effect on the manufacturing of cars, or the manufacturing of motor vehicles. Now, we look at a completely different examples here. A threat of substitute can be solar energy companies for traditional energy providers. Not from the automotive sector, but I thought it'll be good to mix it up a little bit. Now, let's look at the threat of new entrants. Now, every marketplace has established market leaders, dominant players, dominant forces, and new forces that are trying to enter the marketplace and establish a name for themselves. And these new entrants can eat into the market share of the existing leaders. If barriers to entry for these new firms, new concepts are low, then the threat to existing players is obviously high. And barriers can include, things like the amount of investment required to start a company up in the industry, various government regulations that need to be followed, to start trading in a particular industry, and access to various suppliers. Now this is quite important because when you have a network of suppliers that you've been dealing with over a number of years, you get retail prices, you get good prices from them, you get better prices from them. Instead of selling goods on a recommended retail price, they actually sell it to you on a trade price rather. So you get trade prices, and your overall pricing strategy can change, and you can actually generate higher profits. For example, a new entrant to existing automotive companies a few years ago was electric car companies like Tesla. So it's actually influenced the marketplace to an incredible extent. So much so that almost every leading automotive manufacturer has a lineup of electric cars of their own now. So this is a brief overview of the Porter's 5 forces model. And as always, we like to look at some shortcomings of the model. A very important shortcoming and a very important observation to make is that the 5 forces model is applicable to an industry, and a lot of people very wrongly apply it to individual organizations as opposed to industries. That is not the purpose of the 5 forces model, and it doesn't clarify it sufficiently in my opinion. And a lot of people therefore use the 5 forces model in conjunction with sort of like a SWOT analysis. So the applicability of to a specific industry is to be understood, and it is not actually applicable to specific organizations. It is used to gauge the profitability of an industry, not an organization. Again, another major shortcoming is that it doesn't take into account collusions or collaborations between buyers. There can be situations where buyers collaborate with one another, or suppliers collaborate with one another and set guide prices or recommended retail prices to their resellers. So it doesn't take any of those factors into consideration, so it can be considered as a shortcoming. And the model works primarily for understanding profit-oriented industries and organizations, and does nothing for non-profit organizations or government entities. It is purely for profitable organizations looking for a bottom line result. Okay, hopefully that was useful for you. I thank you very much for your attendance to this video, and as always, if you like this content, please like this video, support this video by sharing it, and I shall try my level best to churn out videos on a more regular basis for you. Thanks for the love, thanks for the support, and see you next time. Thanks very much.